When you think of Libya, what comes to mind? Probably desert sands, right? And maybe recent conflict. But its story, man, it is so much deeper. Welcome to our explainer. Today we are diving headfirst into the incredibly long and complex history of Libya. This is a nation that's been shaped for literally millennia by its geography and, you guessed it, a whole succession of powerful empires. So, to really get a handle on this, we're going to trace the story through 5 major chapters, from its ancient origins all the way to the complex reality of today. And as we go, you'll start to see just how much the past is still alive and kicking in Libya's present. Okay, let's dive in. All right, so our story actually starts thousands of years ago. And get this, we're not starting in a vast desert, we're starting in a surprisingly lush, green Sahara, a landscape that was home to early Neolithic peoples, and of course, the indigenous Berbers, whose culture is still so vibrant today. So as time went on, Libya's location, smack dab in the middle of things, made it a total magnet for ancient powers. You have the Phoenicians setting up coastal cities that would eventually become Tripoli in the west. Meanwhile, over in the east, the Greeks built a massive cultural hub called Cyrenaica. And right there, you see the beginning of this east-west division, a split that, believe me, is going to pop up again and again throughout Libya's history. Then, along come the Romans. And they're the ones who finally managed to unify these competing zones, kicking off a 400-year golden age of stability and wealth. I mean, just look at the ruins of cities like Leptis Magna. It's absolutely incredible. The fact that they're still standing today is just a powerful testament to how vital Roman Libya really was. But, all good things come to an end. As the Roman Empire started to crumble, so did its grip on Libya. The region just fell into disrepair. The Vandals swept through, and then the Byzantines took over, but their rule was marked by heavy taxes and decaying cities. This whole period of decline basically left the door wide open. And well, a new, powerful force was already on its way, sweeping across North Africa. So in the 7th century, Arab armies arrived. They met really very little resistance from the Byzantines, who were pretty weak by then, and this arrival completely reshaped the region's culture forever. For the next few hundred years, Libya was ruled by a whole series of Islamic dynasties. This wasn't just about bringing back trade or fixing up old infrastructure. It was a fundamental reshaping of the culture. The migration of certain tribes in particular really cemented the linguistic and cultural Arabization of the whole area. And that's a change that honestly defines it to this day. Fast forward to the 16th century, and yep, you guessed it, the next great power shows up on the scene. The expanding Ottoman Empire conquered the region. They turned Tripoli into one of the most impressive cities on the entire North African coast and brought Libya under one central authority again. Now, under the Ottomans, some local rulers, like the Karamemelis, carved out a lot of independence for themselves, and they relied on a pretty surprising engine for their economy: piracy. Seriously. These corsairs attacked European and American merchant ships, and this whole pirate business eventually led to a direct conflict with a new global power that was just finding its feet: the United States. You might have heard of it, the Barbary Wars. Okay, so as the Ottoman Empire started to fade, European colonial powers were looking around, and North Africa was prime real estate. A newly unified Italy in particular had its eyes set right on Libya's strategic coastline. So Italy's rule is really a tale of two sides. On the one hand, yeah, they built a lot of infrastructure, and about 150,000 Italians even settled there. But on the other hand, they were absolutely brutal in repressing any local resistance to their colonial project. Libyans, led by national heroes like Omar Mukhtar, fought back fiercely for decades. But the Italian response, especially under Mussolini's fascist regime, was just devastatingly harsh. Their campaign of pacification was, in reality, a brutal war that led to the deaths of tens of thousands of Libyans. So, after Italy's defeat in World War II, the big question was, what happens to Libya? The great powers had to decide its fate, and what happened next was actually pretty historic. Through a UN resolution, it became the very first African nation to gain independence this way. It became a constitutional monarchy, sitting on what they would soon discover was an immense amount of oil wealth. But that monarchy, well, it wasn't destined to last very long, because in 1969, a group of young, ambitious military officers saw an opportunity, and they decided to take it. They were led by this charismatic, yeah, but also intensely eccentric 27-year-old officer named Muammar Gaddafi. And this bloodless coup kicked off a 42-year political experiment that would completely, dramatically transform Libyan society and its place on the world stage. Okay, this is where it gets really fascinating. You have to understand the paradox of Gaddafi's rule. On the one hand, you had all this oil money funding huge improvements in living standards, literacy, healthcare. Libya actually had the highest human development index in Africa. But on the other hand, it was a brutal dictatorship. Absolutely zero tolerance for dissent, all backed by this massive state surveillance machine. And on the world stage, Gaddafi's Libya became, well, a total pariah. He was financing rebel groups, sponsoring conflicts, and his regime was implicated in horrific airliner bombings. This kind of behavior turned Libya into an international outlaw, and it got slapped with years of crippling UN sanctions. So by 2011, you've got the Arab Spring kicking off in neighboring Tunisia and Egypt. And all that resentment that had been simmering under the surface in Libya for decades, well, it finally boiled over. What started as a popular uprising in February just exploded into a full-blown civil war. That led to a pretty controversial NATO military intervention, and by October, the regime had collapsed, with Gaddafi himself being captured and killed. And this is so important to understand. Liberation came at an absolutely immense cost. The fall of the old regime didn't bring stability. No, it created a massive power vacuum, and armed militias and rival political factions just rushed in to fill the void. And the next decade, it was just defined by fragmentation. A second grinding civil war broke out between two rival governments, one in the east and one in the west. See? That ancient fault line, it was back with a vengeance. And this internal mess quickly sucked in competing foreign powers, all backing different sides, which only divided the nation even more. Now, a ceasefire has mostly held since 2020, but don't let that fool you. The country is still deeply, deeply fractured. The political process is pretty much stalled, and that feeling of national unity is it's elusive. And the fragility of the state was just tragically laid bare by the devastating Derna Dam collapses in 2023, a disaster made so much worse by years of neglect and division. And that really brings us to the core challenge, doesn't it? After literally millennia of foreign rule and these deep, recurring internal conflicts, the big question remains, can Libya finally forge a lasting, unified identity of its own? It's a question Libyans are grappling with every single day. Thanks so much for joining us for this quick history of Libya. If you want to explore the stories of other nations, definitely check out our Quick Country Histories playlist. And hey, if you want to understand more complex topics in just a few minutes, make sure you subscribe for our next explainer.